string playing has gone straight uphill for the last 50 years. Every year we have more kids than the year before. The media's got it all wrong. We have not lost, yes, occasionally do you lose a program, but every time we lose one, we add 10. So it's the best time in the history of string playing and string teaching. We have the best materials. We have the high. When I look at the young teachers, they scare me to death how good they are.
Episodes like this are why I love doing this podcast. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are chatting with Bob Phillips, who's one of my musical heroes. He's a conductor, composer, bassist, educator. I've seen him live doing sessions with various groups. So cool to see him in action. I have followed him for years. I've played so many of his arrangements and compositions. And when I knew that we were both going to be at the 2019 American String Teachers Association convention in Albuquerque, New Mexico, I reached out and said, Bob, we have to chat for the podcast. Bob graciously accepted, and we carved out some time in Albuquerque to talk about music education, bass, Larry Hurst, Bob's career, which is totally cool, and where he sees things going for music education. You're going to love this episode. Thank you so much to Bob, and thank you to our sponsors, D'Addario Strings, Colstein Music, Steve Swan String Bass, Upton Bass, The Bass Violin Shop, and A440 Strings. Thanks for keeping the lights on here, and let's dig into this conversation with Bob Phillips. How did you get started in music? Where'd you grow up? What was your first instrument?
I grew up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and my background was kind of funny because I didn't really, and very few people know this actually, I never really played in school orchestra because I really started playing double bass at 18.
Really?
And what happened was I grew up, playing guitar, and my family was from the South, and so very wired in kind of the bluegrass thing, and grew up listening to, a lot of that kind of thing. My mother used to listen to this program on Sunday mornings from Renfro Valley, where she was from. And anyway, so knew something about that, and did folk guitar, rock guitar, play classical guitar. Eventually, went to school and just decided I really wanted to do music. So I wandered over to a music department, and hey, you should play bass. And so I did. And so at the end of that first year, I played for a year. I went from a standing start to playing in the Grand Rapids Symphony, doing all kinds of things, playing a lot of ensembles, and then everyone kept telling me I should go to Michigan to study with Larry Hurst, and so I did. So I transferred, and then the way I got into string education was Larry grabbed a hold of me and turned me inside out, and then Elizabeth Green grabbed a hold of me right away. Great, string pedagogue, and so it turned me on to wanting to be, a string teacher. So that's really what happened. But it was a lot of practicing in a short amount of time to get up to speed.
So I've had Larry Hurst on the podcast, and what a legend. I remember this photo in his studio. It's kind of like that day in Harlem photo of all these people that have gone on and done things. I went down when I was at Northwestern and took lessons with Larry. So, and I've talked to a lot of people who've studied with Larry. But if you could think of a couple of takeaways from Larry.
Absolutely. Yeah. What made Larry Hurst magic is his deep belief in every student. The best way, my daughter studied with him at IU also, so I studied with him, and then she went on to study with him. And what was magic about Larry is that, of course, he had a great process, his incredible process, but he just believed so much in us. And the best way to describe it is, the worst thing you could imagine as a student of Larry Hurst is going into a lesson and being unprepared and disappointing him. It was like a great father relationship or mother relationship. Yeah. You just didn't want to disappoint him. And so he was so motivational, and obviously a great teacher, all those things. But and he's just a great human being. The way I said it once, several years ago, there was a big award ceremony that they were throwing for me at where I used to teach in Saline, and they invited a lot of people to come speak, and Larry was one of the people that spoke, and they had 1,200 people there, this kind of thing. Anyway, I said at the end, when I was thanking a few key people, I said, when I was younger, I thought I wanted to. People said, "Do you want to play like Larry Hurst?" I said, "Yes, but I'd have to be a better man first, because he's a great human being first."
Yeah.
That's what distinguishes Larry.
Yeah, and you hear that. Kurt Muroki, who's taken over at Indiana University, he can't say enough good things about Larry, and just like that, helping usher in that change, and just in all aspects, just what a great influence. And then Elizabeth Green,
yes,
too, who I have her books, on my shelf still.
Right.
They've followed me around from place to place. Any takeaways from that?
Well,
amazing
she
pedagogue?
was an incredible human being also. I was in her very last class at Michigan. So, and I spent a fair amount of time with her because she loved bass players. Mm-hmm. Partly because Larry Hurst was a student of hers when he was at Michigan. And so she loved bass players. But the big thing about Elizabeth Green is incredible process thinker. And I'm a process person also, which is why I've, written as much as I've written. So, she was just the most logical, sequential thinker I've ever been around, and brilliant. I mean, just incredibly brilliant. And she was so inspirational, but at the same time, incredibly practical and a great player. Yeah. I mean, when she graduated from college in the 20s, she went out. The reason she went into education is because she a great player, but there were no jobs because they weren't hiring women, and she hadn't thought that one through. So anyway, but great process. So she's just, I learned everything you can imagine about process from her and from Bob Culver.
The path to Celine, graduated. Was that your first job? Was that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was at Michigan, and James Frosteth was the wind education professor, also a former student of Elizabeth Green's. And there was a string program that had been started in Celine a couple years before. And the person that was doing it was Jim's wife, Martha, and she knew she didn't want to progress on up into the middle school because she had young children. She just wanted to do the elementary. So he identified me as the right person, and so they just said, "Look, we want you to student teach here, and we got a job for you," which was kind of a no-brainer in 1975, because it was a bad economy then, and so the fact that there was a job and I didn't have to move and whatever, it was great. And then Martha left a few years later, and I wound up doing the whole program by myself. But it was a great, incredible opportunity that fell into my lap. And what's interesting about it from an advice point of view is I had some of my advisors at Michigan said, "Look, you're going to have some success, and you're going to have people want you to recruit you to a bigger school, a big high school. Don't do it. Stay there and build that program, and you'll learn more." And it was the best advice I ever got, because I did. I stayed there and built it over a series of years. We were a farm community when I went there, and I got introduced as the new band director the first 5 years. And anyway, but it was great, and we wound up building an amazing program, and then created, of course, the big fiddle program, the Celine Fiddlers, and all that. So, but it was great advice, and I was there 27 years, and oh my gosh. It was incredible.
How'd you get the idea for the fiddler program? And I know, is it Stan Nosal? Is that the name?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Up in Wisconsin.
Yeah. I love Stanley Nosal, and I know Stanley Nosal, but that wasn't really the inspiration. Okay. The Celine Fiddlers really, my inspiration was the Calgary Fiddlers. Okay. In Calgary, Canada, and John Crosman and Dean Marshall were very good friends. And I had done fiddling for years with the kids. I started the very first year teaching fiddle tunes, and didn't know that I wasn't supposed to do that. Okay. And teaching hourly, I also didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. And I had a great fiddle player come out of that first class, one of the greatest Scottish fiddle players of all time, Bonnie Rideout. And she's kind of semi-retired now, but records for the Smithsonian, does stuff like that. But anyway, I started using fiddle tunes as motivation. Then my own children, we created a little fiddle band when they were in third grade and kindergarten. And my kindergarten daughter was a bass player, first grade. So she, and at that point we were playing tunes mostly in D and A, so she could mostly play the bass lines with open strings, right? So as she's learning, and she started with a friend of mine, Jed Fritzmeyer, started her, and we were using the George Vance materials before they were published. I got a hold of, I heard he was writing stuff. Yeah. So I got a hold of him, and he sent us handwritten stuff, Xerox.
Yeah.
We used that. Anyway, so long story short, that happened. And then I started, a fiddle club because of that and was teaching fiddling. And then the kids got into high school and they said, wow, we should have a group. Yeah, we should. So we put a group together, and then a lot of great players came out of that era. Jeremy Kittle and a lot of famous players came out of that whole process. But I'd like to tell you it was completely by design and I could see the future, but that's not what it was. I was just having fun with the kids, doing fun stuff, trying to get them to play by ear, we had improvisation classes every morning, just trying stuff, just experimenting, see where it would go, having fun with kids. And good things happen.
Well, yeah, I think things look a lot more orderly in the rearview mirror than they do in the moment, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Was that the beginning, what you were doing there, was that the beginning of arranging and then composing for you and getting that stuff written down? Or when did that all happen?
Yeah, because I always did a little bit of arranging for kids, and I was always writing materials for them, pedagogical stuff, And I would take, I was fascinated with taking, some of the great etude material, whether it be from the violin or the double bass or whatever, and writing out it for group process. So you take an etude, whatever, Kreutzer, and write out an excerpt of it for middle school that would help them for all the same reasons it helps an older student, but just simplify it a little bit or whatever. So I just did a lot of that. And I jumped in Finale and got really proficient as you could in that era in 1987, the first year it came out.
Wow.
And it might have been 86 that it started. I don't know, but whatever. It was the first year, and of course, it was a beast to use back then. But that allowed me to create a lot of materials. So that's where it started. And I just started doing more arranging for the kids and just for my own students and writing. And then eventually, Andy Debczynski and I got together, and we had all these fiddle charts. We're sending them all over the country. People are saying, hey, can I have a copy of that chart that you guys do? And our wives were like, stop it. We're not going to the post office one more time. So they said, you really need to take this to a publisher. So we did. We sent it to 3 major publishers at the same time, which we didn't know we weren't supposed to do.
Yeah.
Big no-no. And we got an acceptance letter from all of them within 48 hours of their arrival, which is very unusual. And that was Fiddler's Philharmonic. And so that set me down. And we just happened to choose Alfred because we knew John O'Reilly there, and we just, So anyway, for whatever reason, we chose Alfred. And then that opened up a big door for me. And when I eventually left teaching, after 27 years, it was because they wanted me to write full-time, and they had a job for me as director of string publications. And so I thought it was just a nice time in transition, and I've really enjoyed. And it also allowed me to do a lot more clinics nationally, so I could just be out and about a lot. And so that's how that all happened.
When I was recently chatting with Gary and Eric of Upton Bass, I asked them, how did they do what they do? How do they build their presence and be so top of mind among bassists around the world? Here's what they said.
My ego doesn't want to say this, right? And Eric's won't like it either. But because of the timing, we couldn't do, again, what we've done.
Yeah. And what they have done is absolutely extraordinary. From their beginnings as an accessories shop online to now making over 120 basses a year. They're coming up, as I record this, on 1,700 basses. They've got an army of satisfied customers who bought multiple basses. They're just really doing great things. They do great work and stand behind their products. Check them out at uptonbass.com. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, guys. This episode is brought to you by the A440 Violin Shop. It's located just down the street from Wrigley Field in beautiful Chicago on the north side, just off the Brown Line. I have been going there my entire adult life, and they have been fantastic, both for repairs. I've had cracks repaired, I've had seams glued, I've had all sorts of students go to A440 to get instruments, to get bows. They're available with a smile, do wonderful work, and definitely check them out if you are in the Midwest. A440violinshop.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by the Bass Violin Shop, which opened in 2001 as a small double bass workshop in Greensboro, North Carolina. Today, they're staffed by 3 full-time, highly skilled bass luthiers, and they specialize in double bass sales, rentals, setup, restoration, and repair. For nearly 20 years, they have satisfied thousands of clients by offering quality instruments, knowledgeable service, reliable repairs, and superior restorations at affordable prices. They proudly offer the largest variety of fine basses and bows in the Southeast. You can find something at every price point by makers such as Thomas Martin, Bill Lakeberg, Romano Solano, Lemur Music, all Shen models, K, Epiphone, and bows by Louis Morizot, Fuchs, Nürnbergo, Arcos Brazil, and others. For more information and current inventory, visit their website at bassviolinshop.com and be sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, there are 1,000 different directions I'd love to explore. I know you've got a lot. We're here at the ASTA convention, by the way, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 2019, and I've played so many of your arrangements and pieces over the years. Whether it's the Vernon Hills summer camp, middle school summer camp with 150 kids, or with my plucky little fiddle group up in Libertyville, Illinois, or wherever. And it's so going around and doing all these clinics, and I've seen you at the ASTA TEW workshop in Illinois and various other. I poked in very briefly here yesterday to your clinic with Steve Benham on rhythm. Right. This is a super broad question, but it's like from 1975 getting started now, here we are in 2019. How's the landscape changed for those of us going into this career?
Well, first of all, string playing has gone straight uphill for the last 50 years. Every year we have more kids than the year before. Mm-hmm. The media's got it all wrong. We have not lost. I mean, yes, occasionally do you lose a program, but every time we lose one, we add 10.
Yeah.
So it's the best time in the history of string playing and string teaching. We have the best materials. We have the high. When I look at the young teachers, they scare me to death how good they are. You know, I mean, because you build on the people before you, right? I was able to stand on the shoulders of Elizabeth Green and Larry Hurst and Bob Culver. I was able to do some things. But the young people, that I've worked with, and I mean young, I'm talking anywhere from, 45 down to, 20s. Sure. But they just take what some of us, the older generation now, has done and just gone crazy with it. I mean, and they're doing their own new things. And I'm just so excited. I just think it's the greatest time ever. And I think the fact that that kids can play, at least have the opportunity to play, in many cases, any kind of music they want on a string instrument is huge. As a bass player, that's our world, our whole life, right? Yeah. Because, I jokingly say, what difference does it make? When you're playing a root and a fifth, it doesn't matter what's on top of it. You could play any kind of music. Yeah. And that's not, obviously that's funny. But the point of that is just that bass players get thrown into every kind of ensemble possible just because you're a bass player. Yeah. So we don't think about that. We don't really, I don't only play Baroque music. I only play classical music. I only play whatever. No, we play anything, right? And that's how all string playing should be. It's just a voice. Yeah. It's not a genre. It's a voice. Mm-hmm, yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah. So anyway, I think that's what's really exciting is the energy in this. And you look at this ASTA conference and, oh my gosh, there's just so much information and so many terrific, amazing teachers, and I'm just humbled watching the quality of teaching in this country. It's just amazing.
Well, it's so cool to be at an event like this, and AST has been a part of my life, I think. I think I joined in maybe 1990 or something like that, 1989, 1990. I've gone to the conventions over the years, and it's been great for me. I was Illinois State Chapter President. Right. I remember being at the leadership meeting and taking notes. I just passed those notes along, actually, to the new State Chapter President. Again, broad question, but just like ASTA, what it's meant to you, past president of ASTA. Just talk a bit about how that organization's factored into your life.
I think ASTA has had a major role in the development of string playing in this country. And I think it's a way to bring people together. Certainly content, pedagogy, all that stuff, sure. But there's an affective part of it that's much more important. The synergy of everybody being together like this and sharing and supporting each other is huge. And ASTA has tried to lead the way. I think, been in a lot of ways. String playing also often sounds like we're a little stuffy. We've been ahead of the curve compared to most national music organizations in so many ways. We're the only national organization that has a defined curriculum.
Yeah.
We have a national curriculum. We embraced alt styles playing long before a lot of other people did, and tried to be more inclusive. So I think ASTA is just an incredible organization. And when young people say, why should I join? Part of my answer to that, because the question is, what's in it for me? But I want to turn that around to young people and say, John Kennedy, in his famous, inauguration speech, said, asked not what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country? Yeah. Well, for, a little over $100 a year, if you can contribute to an organization that literally his whole mission is focused around the survival and the expansion of an art form that you love, wow. Yeah. How cool is that? Right? And I think sometimes they don't think about that there's people out there. We've got people following legislation in Washington, D.C. every day to see if there's something adversely affecting the string playing community. I mean, a good example is ASTA played a major role in TSA allowing instruments on the planes. Now, that affects people. That's real, right? But my point is, for a little over $100 a year, how incredible is it to have this national organization and infrastructure that helps all of us, because it spills over. If you're a private teacher, for example, we do a lot of things in the public school realm. You think, well, does that affect me? Well, yeah, because if there's a lot of public school kids starting, those are kids that can be in your studio. Yeah. Conversely, studio teachers help the public schools, college people. I mean, it's a synergistic thing. And we're all in this together, right? We all influence each other. Things you're doing with this double bass blog are really cool. I mean, this is neat, right? It's really expanded the conversation, and I have a lot of respect for what you've done with this. I mean, just because you're obviously very entrepreneurial, and you're part of that age group where you just make stuff happen.
Right. Well, it's good to have you a part of it. You've been on my list. I keep a list of people who've been recommended that I should get in touch with. And Bob Phillips, I used to have an Excel spreadsheet, and I would mark in many times. So it's good to actually sit down in person. And that ASTA curriculum, I've used that document so many times for multiple projects. I've got it on my iPad, actually, right here, I think. And I love how it embraces all styles. And like you were saying, bass players, we don't even think about that necessarily. But I was in Fremd High School in suburban Chicago on Wednesday this week. They just had their concert the week before. I sit down with the orchestra director, fabulous program, and the director, she wanted me to work on some improv with the group. And I'm a bass player. I've been improvising my whole life, played jazz gigs, and I've thought for years and years, like how to crack that nut and how to get, especially those, everybody, but especially those violin, viola, cellists to come out of their shell.
Right.
So I tried some things. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But what? And I know you've thought about this a lot. But what are some things that teachers listening, or even private teachers listening, public or private, might do to explore and kind of make that a non-threatening thing?
Well, the answer to that is a deeper question.
Yeah.
We're getting much better in this country. In fact, I'm doing a session this afternoon on elementary instruction that's going to focus on oral skills. We're doing a much better job of teaching orally and giving kids real oral skills. We're not anywhere close enough to where we need to be, but we're better. And that's been one of my lifelong messages, is that lines and dots are just an aid, but it doesn't replace teaching kids to hear chord changes, hear melodies, hear structure, whether it's with exclusively classical or whatever, or if it's jazz. But or rock or whatever. But so part of the answer is oral teaching. Part of it is jump in and keep it simple.
Yeah.
So, for example, I started teaching improvisation in my program in 5th grade, the beginning year, every year. And we'd always have kids standing up and taking solos by the end of the first year. But we were using one of the books that I wrote with Randy Sabine, Jazz Philharmonic. We do a tune like Gruen for the first time. And they might just be doing a 1-bar rhythmic solo. They might be playing a 1-bar melodic solo with one scale or just a certain number of pitches. The easiest, when I teach improvisation, and I'm not a great improviser, but when I teach improvisation classes to kids in schools, the easiest place to teach improvisation is the first year. The hardest place is the advanced top high school orchestra, because or adults is the worst because they have so much information and so many choices. But when you're a fifth grader and you've played 3 months and you know 3 notes, you've only got 3 choices. So if you give them a structure, a harmonic structure or whatever, where they can just use those 3 choices and the 4 rhythms they know, it's not a big deal. Yeah. They'll just try. So to me, it's all about oral skills first, teach it by ear, but then also controlled choices. Mm-hmm. So you give them limited choices so the selection process is easy. Build those skills. And the best example is a cute little story. I had this young lady in my, in fact, Jeremy Kittle was in this class, who's a great improvising violinist. Sure. So this girl, the first day we were doing this improvisation class, 6th grade, before school, and I had 40, 50 kids in this improv class. She's sitting there, and I'm doing, it's when I first started teaching improvisation many years ago, and they didn't have my process down as tight as it is now. Anyway, so I did a little bit too much too fast, and I said, to this girl, could you play this? I can't do this. Well, end of the year, Randy Sabine's coming in to play with the kids, and we're going to do a concert, and so we're signing solos. I said, okay, so here's an 8-bar thing. Who wants that one? And she looks at me, and the same kid that couldn't play a bar at the beginning of the year says, Mr. Phillips, really, I got to have at least 32 bars. I don't think I can play a solo of just 8 bars. I need more time than that. Well, there you go, right? And what I found is, and the answer to the parts of the answer, this is a 40,000 foot view thing, but part of the answer is I found in my career the only thing that ever held kids back and limited them was me. It was always me. My lack of vision, my lack of trying something, being afraid of something. I'm not a great improviser. I'm not a great by ear player, but I turned out some kids that were awesome by ear players and improvisers. Because I gave them the opportunity. So jump in, try it, and find out. Talk to Jason Heath. Talk to somebody that knows how to do it and say, look, can you just show me how to, what's a simple way to start with a 12-bar tune or whatever it is?
This episode is brought to you by D'Addario Strings. Our friends at D'Addario want to help listeners change their strings safely and efficiently, and they have a few tricks to help you achieve that. Here's a great tip. Change your strings 2 at a time, removing them from the inside out, then replacing them from the outside in allows for easy access to the lower pegs, ensuring strings lay neatly in the peg box. Learn more at orchestral.daddario.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Steve Swan String Bass. Steve has been active in the bass world and also the guitar world for years. Here's a bit from our live podcast taping with Steve on how he got into that business. Guitars and basses.
Guitars and basses.
Okay, how did that happen?
They're both helper instruments. I've always played the rhythm guitar, quite often with bass lines moving, either in swing style, jazz style, or country style. Bass is the same thing, supporting the band, the group of people you're playing with. So I've always felt like I was a support person.
I love how Steve describes being a support person, and he is certainly that for the bass community here on the West Coast, here in the San Francisco Bay Area. His shop is located just south of San Francisco, and he has a large retail showroom with about 70 basses on display. And these basses are professional top-of-the-line basses. These basses are student-level basses and everything in between. They're beautifully set up. So if you're looking for a bass or you know someone who is, be sure to check out Steve at steveswanstringbass.com. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast, Steve.
Yeah, it's a fact, and those books are great, by the way. I use those with my Libertyville jazz strings. I use those in Glenbrook South, and those Sabine Gruden for the first time, and they're a great way to get into that. And another thing, since I have you here, things that I've dealt with, so many teachers have dealt with, Mr. Heath, there's nothing for me to do in this bass part. You know, if we've got an arrangement X, Y, or Z, whether it's 7th grade orchestra or freshman orchestra, and then of course, then the same students 3 years later are feeling lost in the high school groups.
I've got an answer for that.
Oh, great.
All right. First of all, I would say to anybody out there, for those of you out there that don't know, my current job in the last 15 years is to be director of string publications for Alfred Publishing. So, for a long time, I worked with Richard Meyer. He was one of the other editors, and so our our thing is, and when I write, and this is what I encourage all writers to do, and it's a different way to think about it, you have to have great musical content in every part if you're writing educational arrangements. That's part of the reason it's educational music. Because, and why I say that is this, a lot of music that you do that is done in the past, the first violin part, like let's say the piece has been grade leveled at 2.5. Well, the first violin parts might be 3. The second violin part might be 2. The viola part might be 1.5. The cello's probably 2.5, and the bass part's 0.5.
Yes.
And so the problem is, then we have, in this country, orchestras, we have kids progressing at disproportional rates because we're giving Shakespeare to the first violins, and by the time we get to the basses, we're doing tweets.
Yes.
Okay? And so the problem is we're not demanding enough of the bass players. Now, the question is, but are you, people out there might be saying, but Bob, are you saying that the bass part should be as hard as the first violin part? No, I should not. All composers through history have leveled their music. You know, and the way I tell people that is, what's the hardest instrument to play in the strings? Double bass. You can't argue that.
Yeah.
If you play the Tchaikovsky violin concerto on the violin and then do it on the bass, it's a lot harder on the bass. Okay,
it's true.
And and violinists, if you have to shift 5 times to play on 1 octave scale, they'd understand how hard it is to play the bass. But my point is just this. Yes, the music can be technically easier, but it should have the same level of musical content, melodic content. So I try to never write a piece unless it has a bass melody. It might be paired with the cello sometimes, it might not. But at every level, I don't care what level it is, it has to have the exception to this. So that's what I would challenge all educational composers to do. Now, what do you do if it doesn't have it? Change it. Let them play. Have them write in something from the cello line, from whatever. Change it around. Do something. But make sure that your basses, and this is especially for orchestra directors teaching violin, their violinists, viola, cello. Just make sure that those kids have content, and then you're giving them the skills to do it. And the same thing when they're building technique. Demand of them the same things everybody else is. I mean, we sometimes, and part of that is, it's so easy to teach to the violins. It's so easy to do that, and we don't develop our violoncellos. But I'll tell you, there's not a great high school orchestra in this country. If they're a great one, it's always because, most high school orchestras have really terrific first violins.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have pretty deep seconds. Cellos are often really good. Violas, basses are always the weak link, and sometimes seconds. But when you hear a great high school orchestra, the violas and the basses are just awesome because that's where, and you teach them to listen down, right? So part of this message, this long answer to this question, is that we've got to look at the bass in a different way, and we've got to train people in the universities to think that way, and people have to become experts in the instrument. As string teachers, I spent enormous amounts of time my first 5 years taking lessons on violin, viola, and cello. Why? Because I knew I could not be a great string teacher unless I really understood those instruments. Well, if you're a violinist, you need to take some bass lessons, right? I mean, you need to understand the instrument. You're teaching it, so that's part of it. But don't be afraid to change a part. Give them something.
And I think that's something that people that do arranging and composing and some of the best educators out there, that's advice that I've heard too. I think people are so sort of scared of altering the printed page, but in an educational setting, if it's not doing it for that, if they're giving, like you said, a 0.5 for the basses and a 3 or a 3.5 for the first violins, leveling the playing field is
Let them take it up an octave.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of creative things you can do. And even within the section, maybe they're not playing the exact same part because you've got kids that are at really radically different levels based on somebody taking lessons and not. But you find ways to challenge. But that's differentiation, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to be doing every day. You're supposed to be differentiating, based on the kids, background and where they're at and everything else. So because we're paid to teach all of them, not just some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got a lot going on here, but this is great. I've got one more question, and thank you for chatting.
It's an honor to be asked.
It's fun to chat. And you've given a lot of great advice, obviously, to people at any stage in their career, beginning or anywhere. But if you want to do another 40,000-foot view, for people that are just starting out, they're 18, maybe they're in music ed program at what could be University of Michigan, UW Whitewater, you name it. Anything for them to keep in mind as they're embarking at the very beginning of the training for this career?
I would say be lifelong learners, find mentors, go out and seek out the information, and realize that you have stages of development in your career. Year 1 is one stage, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is a key one. Next 5 years, and do that your whole life, because it's the best profession ever. You'll never have a more rewarding life, but you need to be constantly learning and trying new things, improving, be open to new ideas. And I'll give you 2 quotes on that. When I started off, I was determined I did not want to teach the same year 30 times. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to, every year was different than the year. I kept trying new things, going different directions. The other thing is, the question I asked myself every day from the first year of teaching on, I said, am I preparing students for my past or for their future? In some ways, sometimes in programs, we're doing a really great job of preparing kids to live 100 years ago. Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's why I started incorporating so many RL skills things, composition, whatever, all the different things, because I wanted kids to have skills and be able to do anything they wanted to do and be lifelong musicians and participants and to love music. And so I would say for young teachers is just, and don't be afraid to ask for help. There's the vast majority of teachers that we lose at the end of year 3 or 4. And there's a reason for that. It's because of their particular cycle that they're going through. But don't be afraid to ask for help and get mentor teachers. And maybe that mentor teacher is just 2 years older than you are, and they've been through it, and they know, okay, here's what I experienced my first year. But I think a lot of the young teachers I see, they go out there and they feel like it's a sign of weakness if I have to ask for help. But, it's not. I come to this conference, and I sat on some sessions yesterday, and I went, wow, was that a great idea? Why did I never think of that? There was one I saw yesterday, and I'm like, that is a brilliant idea, and I never thought of that. Wow, I can't wait to go out and try that somewhere, And I think that's what makes the career exciting and fun and gives you a reason to want to constantly get better and be engaged with kids. If you're excited, the kids are excited.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bob, pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting. It was a real thrill, and I'd love to do a round 2 or round 3. There's so much we could dig into. And thank you for listening to this. Maybe this is your first Contrabass Conversations episode. If so, you've got almost 600 in the archive, so feel free to dig through. If you've been following for years, thank you. It was pointed out to me at the ASTA convention that I'm one of the OG classical music podcasters, if you want to use that word. And I never really think about that, but I guess that is true. This show started in 2007. Different landscape back then, for sure. Here we are as I record this in 2019, and it's just so cool to be on this journey with you, with everybody that's listening, with everybody that I feature. So thank you so much. And if you ever want to reach out, feedback at Contrabass Conversations will put you in touch with me, and I respond to each and every message I get. It may take me a couple days, but I will get back to you. And I'm just so thankful for all of you that have been listening over the years or months or days if you just discovered this podcast, but it really means so much to me. And I really want to thank the team that puts these episodes together. Couldn't do it without these fine folks. This podcast is produced by Mitch Mooring, who makes beautiful basses in the Dallas area. You can learn more at mitchmooring.com. Thank you so much to Steve Hinchy and Michael Cooper, who edit these interviews. Such a vital thing. So thank you so much. Thank you to Trevor Jones, who goes through and publishes and promotes all of this and takes care of all the back end details, of which there are many. And thank you to Krista Copper for going through and cataloging everything we talk about. Everything we talk about. It's crazy. But she has put together this wonderful resource currently behind the scenes. Only I can see it in the team. But we're working on best ofs and highlights and all sorts of future projects. So thank you to Krista, Trevor, Mitch, Steve, Mike. It's so great to have you all on board. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.